Follow me your conscience. I want to bury it inside here.
Yes.
All the people that you see here are students. But the most important thing is that they don't know what to expect in the future. But the French kids who are going to school just like you, they know already when they finish the school, they have a job, they have a house, they have America! France! England! Arab! Everyone! Africa, we stand together! Well, let's talk about the real business, revolutionary business. I have a question for you. Between the generation of our ancestors and today's generation, which generation would you think is a generation of slaves? And which generation would you think is a generation of prisoners of war? Now, before you answer to the question, I need to explain to you the difference between a slave and a prisoner of war. A slave primarily is a person who wakes up in the morning and does things willingly to please his master. Is a person who believes deep in themselves. He believes that his conditions are God-given conditions and there's nothing that can be done to change those conditions. He was born or she was born to serve his master or the interests of his master or her master. That is what a slave is. It doesn't being is not supposed to be pushed. It's not supposed to be forced, to be coerced to do things that he or she does, but it's willingly done to please the master. On the other side, you have a prisoner of war or a captive of war. And a prisoner of war is someone who is forced to do things that he does for the master. He's being forced, coerced, and sometimes punished to do things, to produce, and to do whatever that he has to do or she has to do for the master. Now, when you look in the time that is known for slavery and colonialism, and today's time, you will see that during that time, there were revolts, there were protests, there were revolutions. That's why we even talk about the Haitian Revolution. Our ancestors fought. Our ancestors revolted. Our ancestors fought back. Our ancestors refused to work in those plantations. And that is why you have in Congo about 15 million that were decapitated, hands chopped off because they didn't want to go and work in those industries of rubber. In the Western Hemisphere, where our ancestors were brought, they fought, they resisted. On the continent, the Ashanti War, it was a war of resistance. Mau Mau, it was a war of resistance. As I said, Congo, South Africa, everywhere across the continent, our ancestors fought, revolted, and rebelled. But today, we are not fighting, we are not revolting against the system, we are not doing the revolution as our ancestors did. So the question is that supposed to mean that we are better off compared to our ancestors? The answer is no, absolutely no. We have just gotten comfortable with the chains, with the conditions. In reality, when you think about it, when you study it scientifically, you will realize that the conditions have gotten even harder compared to what our ancestors went through. The conditions have gotten even harder and very much harsh. But the point is that due to human capability of adaptation, we have just adapted to the conditions and we have learned to get comfortable within the conditions of oppression. That's why we are not protesting. That's why we are not revolting as our ancestors did. Now, let me break down to explain to you how the conditions have gotten so bad, even though we don't realize it. Let's begin with slavery. Really, what was slavery? Slavery was a system by which the slave masters captured our ancestors. For what reason? For the reason of being used, or I should say, for the reason of using their energy in order to work the first, I should say, the foundation of the first industrial revolution in Europe. As we know, the first industrial revolution was based on energy conversion and usage. So the energy of our ancestors, right, through the free labor was necessary to develop the Western countries. That's why Africans were brought to the Western countries to be worked in those plantations, cotton plantations, sugarcane plantations, tea plantations, so forth and so on. It was about the free labor that could put European on its trajectory of economic development and industrialization. So that was slavery. It didn't alter the minds of African people. It just forced them to work physically. So because they were still free people in their mind, they were able to resist, to protest, to revolt, to do all the things that they did. Now, moving from colonialism, from slavery, we got into colonialism. What was colonialism? A system of extraction, which means it's an advanced system, from slavery. It was now a system more advanced in a way that it was now targeting the African energy as well as the African land for the resources of African land. So that's where we saw European countries, European people actually leaving Europe, came to Africa, capturing Africans on the continent and capturing their lands, doing what can be called appropriation of African energy and African resources, which is the land. And through colonialism, the land and Africans were both used, right, for the benefits of the Western countries to extract the resources that were going to still advance the economy of the Western countries. And that is why Dr. John Henry Clark says that colonialism is a more sophisticated form of slavery. It's a sophisticated form of slavery because it was now an advanced stage of slavery. We see how things are moving from physical body or physical energy of Africans to the physical energy of Africans with the land, which is now colonialism. Now, today, we live in what is called neo-colonialism. What is neo-colonialism? It is then a system which has allowed European countries to capture the African physical energy, to capture the African land and its resources, and to capture the African mind. This is very important, and this is what we call a total conquest and destruction of African people, in a way that we have been captured now physically, and our land is being captured, right? And our mind has been captured. Now, why the mind is important is because now you don't need the slave master to come on the continent to tell you what to do, how to work, to serve his interest. We have been turned into machines or the tools that have to work automatically to serve the Western interest. That is the reason why we go to universities, we get certificates, we get degrees, and we draft our CV properly, only to do what? To impress the slave masters. All our leaders, they write their CVs, they go to Paris, they go to Washington, to do what? To appeal, to sell, right, the service to the Western masters. And this is in a bracket, when the demand is higher, then when the offer is higher than the demand, the value diminishes. That's why African leaders don't have values today, because there are more, offering the same services to the slave masters, and the demand is just little and the value has decreased. Now, coming back to the point, we are now living in a time where Africans themselves, they are driving the machine of colonialism. That's why we call it neo-colonialism today, a new form of colonialism which is not managed by the Western individuals or Western representatives or Westerners themselves. Is being now managed by the stooge of Western hegemony who happen to be Africans themselves. You see, what you have to understand about the independence of Africa, because we believe that sometimes we believe that we are free because we have gotten independence. The reality is that independence of Africa was actually a cost calculus to transfer the cost of running colonies onto Africans themselves. You must remember, colonialist powers such as France, Germany, England, They were running colonies in a way that they were taking care of the health care, they were taking care of the education, they were taking care of the military, civil servants. All these were costs that they had to incur for a long time until they realized that it was becoming so expensive to run colonies. So what can we do? We have to pass on the cost on Africans themselves to manage themselves, but we have to just wait and get the dividends on a yearly basis. That's the reason why France is still able to get like 400 billion US dollars, I was told, from 14 countries that it has colonized on the continent, while the people who are managing those countries are Africans themselves. How can you explain that? So if you want to understand what independence was, it was just a removal of the white colonial administration on the African continent to be replaced with the black colonial administration. So, my friend, your country is still very much a colony of Western powers. Just now, it is being managed by black people like yourself. So, this is the greatest achievement of European countries, which even Chinese, Arabs, Indians have to thank European countries, because all of them are coming to Africa and exploiting us based on the destruction that European countries have managed to achieve on us, which is the domination of our mind, domination of our bodies, and domination of our land. You wake up in the morning today, every day. You are not being forced, you are not being beaten to go in the capitalist industry to work, in the plantation, modern plantation, which is capitalist industry, to sell your life, to sell your time, to sell your labor, to sell your energy for its progress, right? You are not being forced to do that. But during the time of our ancestors, they were being forced, they were being beaten, they were being, sometimes even killed to go in the capitalist plantation, in the slave plantation, to sell their life, to sell their labor, to sell their energy. You do that today willingly. So this is where you have to understand that the mind, the body, and the land has been captured. That is the reason why the gold of Africa, the coltan, the copper, the diamonds, the oil, all these things are being exploited on a daily basis. But we as African people, we get nothing in return. We remain poor, we remain unemployed, we remain hungry, we remain deprived of all the necessary, of the necessary basic needs that can give our lives meaning and make us people who live in dignity, right? Simply because all these things are being taken to provide for the kids in the Western countries. So the question to you again, who really is a slave? Is it us or is our ancestors? And I'm sure you know the answer now. So how can we break out of this system? We need to do what our ancestors did. You see, they didn't have TikTok, social media, all these things, but they were able to organize, right? Marcus Garvey organized about 15 million. Malcolm X organized. All these people organized without social media. Why can't we do today? Simply because we have gotten comfortable. So it is time for us now to begin organizing in order to break the neocolonialism that has been forced on us, so that we do things willingly, like automaton, without even realizing it. So organization is the first step. So if you really don't want to remain a slave, obedient, acquiescent, I invite you to join any particular organization that you know is working for the real change in a society. And if you don't have one, join us in the African Continental Unity Party and let us work together to build the power base that can really trigger our freedom and liberation. It is time for change, and you are the agent of this change. Not just the leader that you are expecting, but it's you and me together. Common people have made the history, are the ones who have written the history of the world. So join us, let together work for the change that we want. Peace and love, freedom and decolonization to all African people, those at home, those abroad, and those in the future. If you like this message, please subscribe, like, and share. If you have 2 shoes, sell one and buy a sword. If you have 2 trousers, sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is in the mind. Peace and love. See you again.